Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I'm going to talk a little bit about this South Carolina Ole Miss game with Jamie Bradford. Jamie, how you doing, man?
Good, good. We're good, and hope you're good. Obviously, so many millions and millions of people had to deal with the storm, and so we've been thinking, including us. We had a bunch of tornadoes and stuff around here, but we're thinking about everybody that's going through all this. It's just an awful situation, and football is way down the list when it comes to everything. But hopefully, football can also bring a little bit of joy to the lives of people who've been having to deal with this awful tragedy. So thoughts and prayers with everybody, anybody that watches your show that's going through this, them, their friends or family. We're thinking about you.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly does put it in perspective, right? Your team loses or drops a big game or does something that frustrates you, kid flips or decommits or whatever, and you're mad and frustrated. And then you think like, well, that guy doesn't have a house. So
Yeah.
it does put it into perspective. Anything we complain about or get excited about, even the good things like certainly pale in comparison to what's really important. But maybe this will, if you are impacted, maybe this will give you a brief 15-minute distraction from that and let you not think about it. But yeah, certainly our thoughts and prayers are with folks in that area and that are impacted. I know several and want
Yeah.
to remember them. So
Mhm.
that said, back to football for a moment, and we'll
Yeah.
maybe try and give people that break for not thinking about it. But South Carolina was off last week and faces a team in Ole Miss this week that I don't know if you're South Carolina, like, are you happy that it was shown that that Ole Miss can be pretty beatable by a team that you beat, right? Not to play the transitive property game, or would you rather them be still riding high coming off of a win? I guess it's are you glass half empty or half full on this? But just thoughts on general thoughts before we kind of dive into them on Ole Miss coming off the Kentucky loss.
Yeah, look, Ole Miss is just they are an excellent football team, and I this league is really difficult, and Kentucky it it felt like after they got beat by Georgia, this program is going to go one way or another, right? They're either going to really fall off the cliff, or they're going to rebound and they're going to surprise somebody. They're going to beat somebody they're not supposed to beat, or at least that the outsiders think they're not supposed to beat. And they did that. They did the latter. They went into Oxford and they won the game. And I think for South Carolina, it it laid out a blueprint of how you at least can slow down the rebels. So hat tip to Kentucky for doing that. The Gamecocks go up there and beat them by 25 points on their home field, and then they almost topple the Dogs, who are ranked number one, and lose by one, and they still keep it together and go in there and win the game with ball control offense, a dual threat quarterback, and or two quarterback system really, but using it in a dual threat manner, and the front seven of their defense playing so well. What does it mean for Ole Miss coming to South Carolina? I mean, I think it would mean a lot more if it was a real fluky afternoon. If it was a fluky afternoon and Ole Miss walked off the field thinking that if this strange thing didn't happen and this strange thing didn't happen, and then maybe if South Carolina wasn't kind of up for the challenge, because the Gamecocks are built a little bit like Kentucky, like what you saw from the Wildcats Saturday. It's kind of who Carolina is, but a little bit of a better version than. So, if it wasn't for that, I would say that, oh man, they're going to come in ticked off, and they are going to come in ticked off. They have every reason to be. I'm talking about the Rebels here, but at the same time, South Carolina's pretty good on defense, as they've proven, and offensively, we've at least got a good idea of what they want to try to do there, and I think that laid a blueprint. What does it mean a win? Absolutely not. We've got too much respect for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss around here to think that they're gonna come in and just lay down. They won't. But it's going to be a really, really interesting matchup on Saturday.
Sellers wasn't able to go against Akron. There's still certainly some question
Yeah.
what's going to happen at the quarterback position.
Hmm.
I'm assuming that you haven't gotten like a text from the head man to know what's going on, and I'm sure he's gonna whether he knows or not right now, gonna try and keep that as close to the vest as he can. But
Sure.
I mean, how much different are your expectations if he's not able to go for how the game goes down?
Yeah, well, luckily we now have these these injury reports that all the teams in the league, when they're playing a league game, you got to follow the rules now. So on Wednesday, we're going to know about Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders. I know last week Rocket Sanders really was hunkered down trying to get his ankle right. And I was told this morning they're pretty optimistic that he'll be able to go. And I was told a couple of days ago that they were fairly optimistic about Lenore Sellers being in really good shape to play the game. However, if for some reason South Carolina's starting quarterback can't go and they have to return to Robbie Ashford, I think that they saw look, no disrespect to Akron, but they're really not a very good football team.
Yeah.
They did everything they could to come in and try to keep things close, et cetera, et cetera. I got a lot of respect for Joe Moorhead, by the way, but they're just not that good. And Robbie Ashford did what he probably needed to do against them. But most importantly, beyond the numbers and the stats in that game, he gained a lot of confidence in himself and in the system that he's playing in here with Coach Loggins at South Carolina. Mike Shula, of course, is developing quarterbacks on this staff now. The former Alabama head coach, longtime NFL OC and assistant. They've got really good dudes in there that are working with the quarterbacks and every day getting them a little bit better and a little bit better. Um, Going back to the Ole Miss Kentucky game, no disrespect at all to Brock Vandegrift, a 5-star kid. What an excellent kid. I've watched his interviews over the years. He's a man, model dude. That's who you want in your program. Um, from a dual threat standpoint, though, I would probably take Robbie Ashford over him. Robbie continues to throw the football better. Vandegrift waits a little. Yeah, he kind of sits back there and kind of dies. He don't have a lot of time, man. You got to get the ball out.
Yeah.
That's something that Ashford has improved on. He certainly isn't scared to chop it down and take off and go where he needs to go. And they're getting him out of the pocket and doing some little things that seem to work. So I think the staff would tell you that they're just as confident in Robbie as they would be in Lenore Sellers. Is that true? I don't know. Maybe not. Um, but I do think that confidence has grown greatly, and I think most importantly, Robbie feels really good about himself and where he is. So how would it impact the game? I'm not so sure that it would impact the game plan a whole lot. I think that they would still go out there and do the things that they feel like they're really good at doing.
Hopefully I'm not. Well, yeah, speaking on Brock, yeah, Kentucky could have won that game by more if he just led guys well and throwing the ball. He had a couple of plays down in the red zone where guys were just, could have thrown two more touchdowns if he doesn't throw behind them. And, I mean, I like Brock a lot, to be very honest with you. Like, he's just a solid, steady kid, but he is, call a spade, just somewhat physically limited and not the most accurate at times. And he had some other plays that were, dimes, and that's fine. Like, he's going to be hot and cold. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, that, Kentucky could have won that thing going away. That's how much better I think they executed outside of the few throwing misses. But defensively, you know this, and you even mentioned it, South Carolina, a pretty defensive team, and hopefully I'm not about to jinx it, but I've never, I kind of had some concerns around like the Dart hype coming in, just, the automatic like, oh, Ole Miss is going to win go to the playoff and he's going to win the Heisman. And it was just like, I don't know, man. Like, I probably need to see that before, before I go all the way in on it. So again, hopefully I'm not jinxing it, but Kentucky proved last week that you can rattle him. And if you get after him, and South Carolina certainly has a good defensive line, I don't need to tell you that. If you can get after him and make him uncomfortable, he looked frustrated the whole day, and I know that's going to be the South Carolina game plan, and the way that they want to attack this thing is to get after him. And I mean, that's how you try to attack any game, is to make the quarterback uncomfortable like that. I'm not breaking news here, but if South Carolina finds success with that and can keep them off his game, I think they'll have an excellent chance to pull the upset here.
Yeah, I do too. One of the things that seemed to really rattle Ole Miss in that offense on Saturday was the fact that they just couldn't get back on the field. I mean, Kentucky just kept grinding that thing down, and that's what happens to these offenses that might like to move really fast, as you know, and they want to get back out there. They want to stay in rhythm, and when they're not, when they're having to wait on 6, 7, 8 minute drives to complete themselves, and the defense on the other side is refreshed and they're ready to go, and those type things, it can cause some issues. And I think that happened to Ole Miss this weekend, and it's going to be very important for South Carolina when they are on offense to stay on offense, to sustain some drives. That's been an issue for Carolina this year. They're not picking up a ton of third downs. Still, somewhere in the mid 30s or something like that. That's going to need to improve if they want to beat some of these better football teams. South Carolina's got to continue to work on protecting the football. Their quarterbacks have been hit a few times and the ball's kind of rattled out. That can't happen against teams like Ole Miss. Penalties need to continue to come down. And those type things, the quarterbacks are getting sacked far too often. That's not all on the offensive line. They played so much better than in 2023. But, just missing some things on the perimeter, not picking up a blitz here and there, quarterbacks waiting too long to get rid of the ball. It's been a culmination of things that have led to that. Those things will get you beat, and Carolina's got to be careful of all of them, or Ole Miss will walk into Williams-Brice and beat the Gamecocks, and they would deserve to do so. But if you can keep the Rebels offense on the sideline, we just saw this. I mean, they were really discombobulated out there trying to stay in rhythm. And one of the things, too, I'll add, Ole Miss, they're very, very talented. I'm a huge Jackson Dart fan. Love Henry Parrish, the running back, Trey Harris, that wide receiver. This team's been built a lot out of the portal. One of those portal guys is Juce Wells, and of course he was at South Carolina, and I think he only had one target, didn't even have a catch, I don't believe, in the game against Kentucky on Saturday. That's going to add some extra emotion into this game, and I'm not just talking about the fans. The South Carolina football team was not happy with Juce Wells, and there were a lot of things that kind of went on behind the curtain, leading this team to believe that he's going to return and then not returning, and just a lot of strange stuff. And even Nikki Manwardy kind of put out some tweets and stuff earlier in the year targeting his former teammate. They're ready for him to walk into Williams-Brice. So it's going to be important when it comes to penalties to keep the emotion in check. You're going to have 80,000 people on your side. You're going to get caught in it. There's no doubt about it. But don't let something stupid or silly happen out there that costs you a drive or that costs you a play or a touchdown or something like that. That's a point that nobody's really going to talk about in the national media this week. But locally, we all not kind of know what's going on, and Shane Beamer and his staff are going to have to keep those guys in check.
Yeah. It's been a couple of weeks. We didn't talk about this, right after, and it feels like, it's been half a month ago now. But coming out of the LSU game, it's so hard to really gauge when you play a team like Akron. But they did what they needed to do against a team like Akron and dominated them. And you can only play who lines up against you. And so, but any kind of concerns? It's been so long now that I doubt it. But any kind of concerns of the way that the LSU game ended, which certainly had its shenanigans from officiating and things like that. But any kind of concerns of carryover from that? I get it's been so long from then, but just kind of like, man, we kind of blew it once. Can we blow it again? Type stuff. If there's a lead, or just thoughts coming out of that one to this.
No, not really. I think there would be if they didn't have a get right game and then an off week. I think you would, if you went straight into an off week, I think there'd still be some frustration, but they had a get right game. They were able to go out there and feel pretty good about themselves coming out of that ball game, and then being able to ease back in, get some things fixed, take some time off, clear your brain, and let's get back to football. They were off for 3 days last week, and now they've been focused on the Rebels since Sunday. So I'm not really concerned about that. I don't think they are either. I will say this though, TJ, it did linger. Even after the game when they played the Zips late that night, Coach Beamer was doing the post-game press conference, and he mentioned LSU 2 or 3 times, which led me to believe, this thing just didn't dissipate into thin air and they move on. It really, really did hurt them. But luckily it fell in a spot where they probably could overcome it better than some others. But I don't think that'll be much of a motivating factor, other than they want another crack at another top team coming to Columbia with a lot of hype around it, and they want to prove that they can get it done this time.
When we talked with you in the offseason, I'll go big picture here, and then I'll try and get a prediction from you. But we spoke in the offseason about just, hot seats and expectations, and could they scratch and claw their way to a bowl? And you got to go out and play every week. But the schedule, as tough as it is still, it maybe looks a little more manageable than it did in the offseason. And that's usually what happens. Teams aren't necessarily as good as you thought they would be, or maybe some teams are a little bit better than you thought they would be. But Ole Miss, certainly a winnable game. Next week's going to be tough. There's no getting around that one. But then at Oklahoma, maybe not as intimidating as once thought. A&M certainly very winnable. At Vandy certainly should be a game they win one way or the other, though it may be tougher than you thought it was or in the
Yeah.
offseason. Missouri winnable. Wofford's going to be a win, and then Clemson certainly not. You're not going to say like, oh, well, that's just an automatic win or anything, but there's no reason that game can't be competitive too. Am I wrong in thinking like the only game that's probably an auto loss is at Alabama, and that's probably an auto loss for everyone in the country, including Georgia last week. So the schedule looks a lot more manageable than it did, month and a half ago. And I think, if they could get a win this weekend, it really feels like it would be, okay, well, now we're not talking about just making a bowl. It's like, how many wins can we reel off of this thing?
Yeah, 100%. That's something we talked about in our programming a lot this summer. That these things, the way that they look in April, and the way that they look in May, and the way that they look in July, and then again in August, it's never what it looks like once you actually get into the thick of it. And in this league, you're always going to have a difficult schedule. It's never going to be easy. It might be easier maybe than you anticipated sometimes. I think that we're also seeing such a change in college football. I just literally just had this conversation last week with my buddy Steven Garcia about how it no longer is a 2 or 3 week break-in period in college football to kind of try to figure out who is who. You're really getting into, you need 4, 5, 6 weeks to kind of figure out the landscape of college football now, because of things like the transfer portal and because of things like NIL. I mean, TJ, look what we just saw last week. I mean, you're talking about guys who are literally deciding to redshirt because they're quitting is what they're doing. Well, I was brought here to play more snaps than that. Well, maybe you're not good enough.
Yeah.
You thought about that, and then
That's
you
why
got
we brought you here too.
yeah,
Play more
exactly.
snaps than you're playing.
I mean, hey, look, man, like look, coaches play kids who are good players. I mean, they don't just not play you.
Sure.
If you're not good, they're not going to play you. If you're good, guess what? You're going to play. I mean, coaches get fired every year for all kinds of Looney Tune things. They need every win under their belt they can get. I mean, they're not going to not play a kid who can help them. So I find that really fascinating. And then you got guys who are, you know, you got NIL issues, et cetera, et cetera. But look, those are the headliners. Most importantly, and being an FSU guy, you absolutely understand this. You bring in so many transfers, you don't know what your program is going to really truly look like for a while. And sometimes you can skate by and you get a couple mulligans. Maybe the schedule sets it up like that. Maybe something fluky happens. Maybe you are good enough to beat, whomever you're supposed to beat. But when the rubber hits the road, you don't know how some of these guys who haven't been in your program before are going to react. You don't know if the program means more to these guys than it does to somebody else who maybe has departed the program. You just don't know anymore. And so it takes a while. You got to get a lot of data and a lot of information to kind of start figuring out who's who in college football. I think it's a safe bet right now every year that Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, no matter who they bring in, they're always going to be so talented. They're always going to be right there. But outside of that, everybody else is probably always going to be a toss up. And so when you look at these preseason rankings and you look at all these things that point to these schedules and, oh, this is going to be tough, you just don't know until the games start getting played and you get 3 or 4 weeks in. And to your point about South Carolina, it does look like it's a more manageable schedule. Now, if the Gamecocks weren't a little bit better, I think that maybe a lot of people thought they were, then it wouldn't look that way. So
Yeah.
they do need to credit themselves in the fact that they have put good stuff on tape, things that, being able to play good defense up front. You got to be able to play in the trenches. You got to be able to run the football. Carolina's shy of just under 1,000 yards rushing through 4 games. That's excellent. These things equate to wins. So if you're not doing those things, you can look at the schedule and think it's easier all you want to. If you're not any better, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So Carolina certainly has done their part, but there are a lot of teams who are looking at the future and looking at the next few weeks and going, okay, maybe this was a little bit more winnable than we thought, and maybe this is a little bit more difficult than we thought. And
Yeah.
and so we'll kind of see. But right now it looks like South Carolina has fielded a team that can compete with almost everybody on their schedule. Like you said, I'm not so sure if anybody can compete with Alabama or not. I mean, Georgia did. Georgia competed with them, of course.
Yeah.
And had that game been played in Athens, they might have won the game. So we'll have to see how it all unfolds. But Carolina's they've given themselves a chance, and they've earned that.
Or if there was just an age limit to where only 18-year-olds and up could play, then maybe Alabama would have lost too, because that 17-year-old is absolutely
Man,
atrociously good.
he is really good, man.
It's almost
Really
not
good.
fair.
Yeah.
So, all right, I know it's early in the week, so if you want to just give a lean, or if you have a predict, and I know there's questions around injuries or stuff, but like, where are you leaning on this? What do you think ends up happening? Subject to change with injury news and stuff, but on a Monday afternoon, what do you think about this game this weekend?
Well, I think
I'll give you a lot of preface and a lot of way to back your way out of this.
No, it's all good. We were talking about the injury reports earlier for Carolina going into the Ole Miss Kentucky game this past weekend. I think Kiffin had a third of his team listed on the injury report. Now, most of them were probable. Who knows if that's gamesmanship? I don't know. I guess you don't want to get fined, but these guys can afford it. But so Ole Miss maybe has some injury bug issues too. I'm not sure. I mean, look, if Rocket Sanders can't go and Lenore Sellers can't go for some reason, let's not act like it's not a big deal. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, Rocket Sanders, look what he did against LSU. This kid he was an All-American in 2022. The kid can run the football, and you are better with Rocket Sanders than without him. There's no question. So that would be 100% a concern to me. On the Ole Miss side, again, I do think that there has been kind of a blueprint that's laid out as to how you can affect them. Now, they're clearly Lane Kiffin is a really good football coach, and he's got a really good staff, and they're going to bog themselves down this week and try to figure out how to overcome some of those things, and they will come up with answers. They're not going away. They're really, really good, and I expect them to come to Columbia and play outstanding football. But again, with that said, I think South Carolina, their strengths play into what beat Ole Miss last weekend, and I think that will give them a good opportunity. Also, over the last few years, all the points that the Rebels put on the board, generally when they go on the road, they don't score as much. Their points per game is down something like well over 2 touchdowns when they go into an opponent's stadium in the SEC. And why is that? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to figure those things out. So I think it will be a really good game. I was a little bit surprised that the line came out at 10. It's been bet down to 9, and I think it'll probably come down another point or a point and a half before they get to Saturday. And I think Carolina is going to play really, really well. I really do. I expect them to play well. I expect them to absorb this opportunity to knock off another team in the SEC that's expected to contend to be in the college football playoff. As it stands today, I think they will get it done. Just based on how they've been practicing and how focused they are and the things that they've been cleaning up. But I don't know if that's much of a prediction or not, but I do think they've got a good chance to win the game Saturday, and I think that they'll do it.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be another fantastic one. The LSU game, I know that South Carolina fans don't want to hear about it, but I mean, that was just, as an outsider, that was a heck of a fun game to witness, to watch. And I think I don't know if it'll be quite as good as, 36-33, but this one should be really, really good too. Like, if they hadn't already gone to Columbia, or if South Carolina had found a way to come out on top of that, or Kentucky didn't, like that, under different circumstances, this could have been the game day game. I mean, they're going to,
my gosh.
They're going to the one team that Florida State was able to beat for a game day game. So yeah, I know that this could have been a game day game under different circumstances, but I agree. I think it's going to be fantastic. And I don't know where I'm ready to pick just yet, but I do think South Carolina covers one way or the other. I think it's going to be a close game. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I do too. I'll be really anxious to see this scene in Berkeley, California. I get it. I get it. This is different, obviously. I've never been there. Miami doesn't have that many fans anyways. And so it's not like they're going to have a ton of them traveling out there. And that's no shot at Miami fans. I don't mean it to be rude. You rarely see the place filled down there. And out in Cal, it's not exactly football city USA. So 6 a.m. from the West Coast at Cal, I don't know. It's going to be something to keep an eye on. So good luck to the game day crew for their trip. But yeah, I look, I anticipate this being a fun ball game, and I'll add this quickly too. if you, I know we're probably way past time, but a couple
No,
quick
you're
points
fine.
here. One, in unfortunately saying this, it had South Carolina beaten LSU, and they came walking into this game undefeated. Everybody in the country probably singing their praises at 4-0. With Ole Miss coming to town, they'd be well into the top 25 by now.
Sure.
I would probably be a little bit more concerned with that, to be honest, because it would be very new to this program. But I do think that LSU game did provide a learning experience for them to understand, big tree fall hard, and it hurts when it happens. That's one. Number two, this is the first time since 2009, TJ, and I was there, that Ole Miss has been in Columbia.
Hmm.
2000, this is talking about 15 years. And that was the night that Sandstorm was born. They came in. Jevin Sneed was their quarterback, Dexter McCluster, that group of guys. They were number 4 in the country. Carolina knocked them off 16-10 on a Thursday night, back when Thursday nights were big on ESPN. And that was a lot of fun. And the SEC scheduling model has been just so disappointing. And I'm
Yeah.
so glad that this thing is changing. There's absolutely no reason for things like this to happen. I mean, Georgia going to Tuscaloosa, that was only the second time in like 16 years that the
Yeah.
Dogs, who live right next door, have been in Tuscaloosa, which is just baffling to me. So the SEC is working on getting this fixed, and they've done a pretty good job with it. That does not need to happen anymore. These teams need to play each other much
Yeah.
more often in home and homes than they have been. And I'm glad to see some of these teams finally getting there.
Yeah. Should be a lot of fun. And I agree. Same thing with like Florida and Auburn and other ones too. They just need to happen more often.
It's ridiculous. You're in the same league. What are we doing? What were we
Yeah.
doing? Didn't make any
Some
sense.
historic rivalries that you're just like, why does this not happen? So,
Yeah.
Jamie, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Yeah, we encourage everybody to download our app. It's called the Chief Sports app, like Indian Chief. Just type in Chief Sports. It's free, and you can watch all of our programming on there. We've got a great network that started in South Carolina, and it's been branching its way out across the country. And we've got all kinds of just really cool content that's not just sports related. You'll find some really neat actual podcasts and things in there, with tremendous guests like Roy Williams, for instance, from North Carolina, and others. So if you download that Chief Sports app, or head to chiefsportsnetwork.com, you can find all of us there. And that's where you can find my show that I'm on every day, Inside the Gamecocks.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you a ton for hanging out, man. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy.